Well, at the end of it all, I still haven't been inside Windsor Castle, fraud or not. I really must go.
Let's go together.
Thank you all very much. Here's another aspect of the cultural import-export business. This time we're fortunate enough to be mainly on the receiving end, because next week at the Hayward Gallery a large exhibition will open called Homage to Barcelona, the city and its art, 1888 to 1936, until the Civil War, in other words. In fact, Spain during this period was ruled by a monarchy, a dictatorship and a republic. And Barcelona, being the centre of Catalan culture, had the added turbulence of the struggle for Catalonia's independence, cultural and political. Among the things the exhibition will do is to show the paintings of Miró and Dalí for the first time in the context of Catalan art. But even so, there's no substitute for going to the place itself and seeing not just what it offers, but perhaps more importantly, how. For Saturday Review, Jonathan Meades didn't take much persuading to take a £25 package trip to Barcelona, where he found that the rain in Spain fell mainly on him.
Forget the city's current appeals to the British, lisping, chaotic waiters and football managers. They exist, certainly, but Barcelona is grand. It deserves a greater recognition than that afforded by sitcoms and Saturday afternoon soccer spots. This is a city of vertigo and of Catholicism and of fairgrounds. In some places, they are all mixed together in one place. But no matter where you go, you'll find that they inform the decorative art and architecture of the city. There are cable cars and funiculars everywhere. They're an obsession as well as a necessity. They afford vertiginous panoramas, and so too do the amphitheatrical gods above the stage of the city, which is two labyrinths: the maze of the barrios, the ancient ghettos, and the rectilinear uniformity of the 19th century grid. The narrow streets of the Old Quarter date from Barcelona's first period of greatness, the late Middle Ages, when it was the foremost trader in the Mediterranean and the most fiscally sophisticated country in Europe. The first public deposit bank had opened here 50 years before the Lombards and the Tuscans had the same idea. The extraordinary Art Nouveau villas of its western suburbs are manifestations of its second period of wealth and influence, the latter half of the 19th century. There grew up here a prototypical bourgeoisie, very rich and fairly philanthropic, a patron class. The greatest of these patrons was Eusebio Güell, a sort of Charles Saatchi with taste. His preferred architect was, of course, Antoni Gaudí, and in many ways, Barcelona is Gaudí's city. If you'd had the misfortune to die at birth in Barcelona in the 1890s, you might have suffered a posthumous fate more dignified than is usual in such cases. Gaudí made casts in the children's mortuary, and the resultant sculpture is here, littered all over the nativity portal of the Sagrada Familia. Also here, at the temple to the Holy Family, you'll find turtles, goats, bones, offal, hooves, teats, conches, gastropods, cattle with skin diseases. There are birds so old they're nearly fishes. It's like a parody of every church that ever there was, a parody realized in icing sugar and submitted to the attentions of a blowtorch and some sweet-toothed rats. Very discriminating rats, mind you. Orwell, a conformist English Philistine, wrote that the anarchists showed bad taste in not blowing it up when they had the chance. Well, that's Puritanism for you, the northern mind at its most drearily commonsensical. It wasn't blown up, thank God, though maybe this was a victory of taste over religious preference. And it continues to grow. When will it be finished? Well, mañana, or whenever your grandchildren reach their dotage. If the Sagrada Familia is the greatest church built since the Middle Ages, then the Parc Güell, originally laid out as the site for a garden city, is the greatest park ever, a sublime hallucination, something conceived in a dream. In the park well on a fine day, you'll find rucksacks smoking dope and people enjoying illicit adventures in cars with steamed-up windows. But the real delight of the place is in the fantastic detail that Gaudí put into everything. The place is a hymn to his imagination and invention.
If you just look at this bench, you can see it swirling around, and it looks completely sort of free. But it's really been designed on two very fine principles. One, that it is a curve that curves in, that gathers people in, so that people can sit down and talk to each other. Because on a straight bench, it's very awkward to speaking to somebody next to you. You have to turn around, no? And then another thing in a park is that if you want to sit on a bench, you always look for an empty one, because otherwise you're disturbing the person next to you. But here with the park, the bench that goes like a serpentine in and out, if you sit on the point of the bench, you've got your back to the other people. Therefore, this sort of design allows for the psychology of the people in a park. They either want to sit together and have a conversation, or you want to sit there and just looking at the other people. That's a sort of psychological point of view and understanding. Then the other is that the actual construction is very simple, because it's completely prefabricated. It was made off-site and brought here of just single pieces, either with a curve going that way or a curve going the other way, and just assembled together. And then, under Gaudí's main idea, Jujol and other people there, broke up all these tiles and made this extraordinary artwork all the way around.
Were the tiles specially constructed to be broken?
No. They were taken from buildings that had been knocked down, kitchens and all things like that, and perhaps he bought it from the stock and then broke it.
Yes.
But it has to be broken because of a curved surface. You can't put a
Sure.
straight tile. That's what they call trencadís here. It's quite a well-known form of construction. So you get this sort of mixture of rational thinking here, not only in the construction, but in the thought, the whole behind the seating, and then the sort of irrational, completely freedom, relaxed attack of this sort of artwork that's going over here, which shows this sort of idea. It's the ideal sort of mixture. You've got the whole lesson of shall we say, the Barcelona culture in this bench, I would say. Yeah.
These figures on the roof of Gaudí's apartment block, La Pedrera, are also the stuff of dreams or of gay, bright nightmares. An entire industry is devoted here and in academic mills across the world to Gaudí and his sources, the Baroque, the rock formations of Montserrat, the Moorish buildings of southern Spain, and so on. But what is important is the transformations he wrought with his mind and his eyes and his hands. He possessed every architectural and sculptural gift. When Gaudí was run over by a number 30 tram in June 1926, just before his 74th birthday, he was initially mistaken for a vagrant. When he died a few days later, however, the entire city went into mourning, and at his funeral, the cortege could barely pass through the streets. Such spontaneous displays don't happen out of duty. The man being mourned was a great popular artist, an entertainer of genius. Norman Douglas, the Epicurean author of South Wind, divided Europe into two cultures, that of the apple, which is sober, Protestant, northern, and really rather dull, and that of the tomato, which is garish and intoxicating and somehow recognizes the fall of man. He presumably thought that there were tomatoes in the Garden of Eden. Nowhere, I think, has tomato culture in quite the way that Barcelona has. More than Naples or Genoa or Marseille, it conforms to the northern ideal of the great southern city. There's an exuberance and vigor to everyday life here.
Los soldados cumplían 12 meses de servicio, pero estaban expuestos al fuego hostil durante casi todo el día. 19.
What we seek, and of course find in such a city, is partly the acceptable, or at least the picturesque face of wickedness.
19.
It is teeming. It It is stained with high-tar sleaze and full-strength lowlife. It's big on macho chestwig culture.
Murieron la semana pasada en esa martirizada área fronteriza. En todo el Vietnam, el enemigo perdió un total de...
It's a place of real energy and visceral excitement and wonderful visual treats. Yet, like, say, Glasgow, to which it bears some odd correspondences, it is devoid of the popular recognition afforded to Florence or Paris or Rome. The historical reason for this neglect is simple. Barcelona missed out on the Renaissance and thus was not part of the topography of the Grand Tour. And this topography still, after 2 centuries, marks our roots abroad. And despite its being the very archetype of the southern city, it is one which has always looked to the north, one which has always turned its back on the Iberian Peninsula, and which has sought to be cosmopolitan and European, as great capitals are wont to do. And it is a capital. Catalonia is a nation. To a Catalan, Spain is a Castilian fiction, a centrist dodge. Beside Barcelona, Madrid sometimes seems curiously provincial, a bit of a hick city.
Barcelona, directo.
This place seems to be in a state of eternal carnival. It's a city of excess in all things: architecture, ornament, food, religios knickknacks. And there's much more to Barcelona's architecture than Gaudí. Here's a house by Puig on the Diagonal, a stone's throw from another by Valéry, whose 2 facades are in completely contrasting styles. The roof is also an excuse for perverse exuberance and decorative swagger. Even a stadium, this is one of the city's bull rings, is done with great flair. It poses as a sort of Moorish Colosseum. And Domenech's fantastical music palace is the quintessence of Barcelona's vitality in the 1890s and early 1900s. The flowering of these years was not exclusively architectural. The Catalan movement, if that's the right word, was also literary, though this was a literature of embalmment, which is chiefly remarkable because it resuscitated the Catalan language. None of the writers is notably well known outside the nation, but the painters are. Dalí, 2 generations younger than Gaudí, is Catalan and has never really left the country for long. Picasso was here during his adolescence and during the early stages of his career. And in his blue period, he drew on his observations of the desperate lives led in the barrios. This was the only stage, incidentally, of his career when his work was emotionally affecting. Guernica is public and propagandist and vulgar. Miró, another native Catalan, began his career here. Picasso's regrettable scrawls now adorn a building that is characteristic of the dull stuff that was erected when the spirit of Gaudí began to fade. The Institute of Architecture, of all things. Barcelona, like everywhere else, felt the heavy hand of international modernism in the post-war years. But there is great hope for the future. The architects of the Catalan National Monument, Ricardo Bofill and Peter Hodgkinson, are in Gaudí's tradition of vast invention and willful outrageousness. Their international reputation is great, particularly in America and in Paris, where Bofill, a Catalan, has retaught the French the lessons of neoclassicism.
The classicism of my team is not classicism by the book. It's not as laid down by the academy. It's about inventiveness, and that's the Catalan style for you. Always innovative. But at the same time, we are reclaiming the tradition of Gaudí and his inventiveness, and dealing with new classicism, not a copy of the past, but a classicism using technology and for the needs of today.
And with the theatre group Els Comediants presenting their contribution to the fireworks season in Carnaval, we leave you. From Saturday Review, good night.